Right, continuing with the discussion of social influence. Now I've talked about compliance, and remember, compliance is when you go along with someone's direct request. Now we're going to talk about obedience. Obedience, and sometimes people will use the terms compliance and obedience interchangeably, but obedience has a little something extra. Obedience is when you comply to direct requests specifically from an authority figure, someone who you consider to be an authority figure. Now, sometimes when I teach in person, I'll ask students, who counts as an authority figure? Who do you consider authority figures in your life? And I'll get all sorts of answers. Sometimes people will say, well, you're my professor, you're sort of an authority figure. Or people will talk about, their boss, a police officer, people in the military, they'll talk about their commanding officers being authority figures. There are various people that you might consider authority figures. So sometimes our compliance may be a little bit different when the direct request is from somebody we consider an authority figure. If your friend makes a direct request from you, you may feel completely way more comfortable saying no. Whereas like if it's your boss, or a police officer saying, I need you to do this right now, you might be like, oh, I don't want to say no to this person. They're an authority figure. All right, so the classic study in obedience is a study conducted, I want to say in the 1960s. Let me go ahead and check. Yes, early 60s. All right, by Stanley Milgram. Milgram is the big name in the study of obedience. And I am going to link to some further videos, not created by me, about the Milgram study, but to give you the basics of the Milgram study. All right, so he wanted to conduct an experiment where he would look at people's rates of obedience to authority. And in this case, the authority figure was somebody wearing a white coat, looking like an official researcher, scientist type of person. And so this was a study that involved volunteers from the community. They were recruited through newspaper ads, and they were all men. It's been replicated since then, but at the time, the original study, it was men recruited through the community, and they show up for this experiment. Now, we have previously talked about, I might have previously talked about experiments where sometimes the actual purpose of the experiment is not completely clear to participants, or it's actually misrepresented to participants. In psychology and science with humans in general, we are allowed to engage in deception, essentially lying. We're allowed to engage in deception sometimes if it's the only way that we can study our particular hypothesis. So this study did involve a little bit of deception. So in particular, when people showed up for participation, it appeared that 2 participants were showing up. Actually, 1 participant was a real participant. The other participant was someone who was in on the study. There's a name for that. We call them a confederate. A confederate is somebody who's part of the study. They have a script or they have instructions for how they're supposed to act. So they're not a true participant. And so 2 people show up. 1 is a true participant. 1 is actually a confederate who has a role to play. All right. So they are told that this experiment has to do with learning, with teaching techniques in particular. And they want to look at the effects of punishment on learning. All right, that's not actually what they're studying. They're studying obedience. But if they tell you what you're studying, you're not going to act naturally sometimes. And so they have to draw names out of a hat to determine who is going to play the role of the learner and who's going to play the role of the teacher. Now, in reality, it's rigged. It's rigged so that the confederate is always going to pick learner and the true participant is always going to pick teacher. All right. So the true participant thinks that they've just randomly pulled the role of teacher. And so they have to work with a word list, and the learner has to learn these pairs of words. All right. And then they say, okay, now here's what we're studying. We're studying the effect of punishment on learning. The way we're going to administer punishment is through electric shock. All right. No one was actually shocked in this study, but they're led to believe that actual shock is being administered when the learner gets something wrong. So there's a machine. All right. I ran out of recording space again. I keep doing that. Folks, I got to remember to clear out my old videos before I start recording. All right, so the real participant is introduced to this big shock box, a shock generator. And this is where videos are helpful. I'm going to link to some videos not made by me. And so it has little levers that you can pull to administer shock to the learner. And the learner is hooked up. It looks like the learner is hooked up to the machine, and you press the lever and it delivers a shock to the learner. It starts at like 15 volts and it goes up in 15 volt increments. So, you go from 15 to 30 volts to 45 volts, and the voltage goes all the way up to 450 volts. Now, folks, different countries have different voltages, like in the walls for homes that have electricity. In the UK, it's like 200 something volts. I'm in the US, where it's 100 something volts. This goes all the way up to 450 volts. So this is going to be more severe than like if you got electrocuted from an electrical outlet in your home. Not that that would be fun if that did happen. And the box is even labeled where you get to the end, it says danger, extreme voltage. And yes, there is a song with that lyric, and so it always comes into my head when I think of that. And it says like danger, extreme shock, something like that. And you can see it in the videos that I'll link to. All right, so every time the learner gets something wrong, they have to go up in voltage. So the first mistake is just a certain amount of voltage. They get another mistake, they get more, they get 15 volts more. So the more they get wrong, the more voltage is administered, or at least it looks like the more voltage is administered. The teacher is not actually shocking the learner, but it's made to look like they are. They think they are shocking the learner. Now, they do have it set up where there are different variants of the experiment. All right, and one variant of the experiment, the learner is in a different room and you can hear them, but you can't see them. But the learner is trained to get some wrong, to get a lot of them wrong, eventually getting all of them wrong. And the learner acts like they are in pain. They will say things like, hey, get me out of here. This hurts. There are even conditions where they were trained to say, like, I have a heart condition and things like that. So the teacher is led to believe that they are actually hurting this person as punishment for their wrong responses. So what's the variable that they are trying to study? What dependent variable is of interest here? They want to see how far the participants will go. Will they go into that dangerous shock level? Now, before the experiment began, the researchers made the prediction that less than 1% of the participants would go all the way up to 450 volts. When I teach in person, I will open it up and ask, hey, folks, how many participants do you think actually went up to 450 volts, the dangerous level of voltage? And I'll get various guesses, but it's, I don't remember the exact number, but it's over 50%. In replications, when they do different replications of this study, it has consistently been more than half, over 50%. Usually I'll see results where it indicates 55 to 65%. In fact, let me check my book real quick and see if they give a specific number. The textbook that we're using for class. I'm not seeing a specific number in the, let's see. Anyway, it's always the majority. It's always at least 50%, and I will see numbers between typically 55 and 65%. So lots of folks would go ahead and keep hurting somebody. Now, if you ask them, why did you do that? They will give reasons like, well, I had to. Another important factor here is that the person wearing the white lab coat, the person who greets them as the authority figure, the scientist saying, welcome to the study, when the person says, if the participant says, hey, I think we should go check on this person. I think we're hurting them. I don't know if I want to hurt this person. The person in the white coat was given a script to say, the experiment requires you to continue. The experiment requires you to continue. Technically, that is unethical. In ethical research, you have the right to withdraw at any time. But different time, different setting, they're allowed to say that. And so even though this person wasn't actually going to punish them for their failure to participate, they perceived it as, this person is an authority figure. They're asking me to do something. I have to do it. Right? And so there have been other studies that have looked at obedience. This is the first attention-getting study about obedience. And so watch the videos I'm going to link to if you want to see more about the study. But what we learned from the Milgram study, the Milgram obedience study, we learned that people will go against their usual behavior when they are when they get a direct request from an authority figure. Not all, but many human beings, many people will go along with the direct request even if they don't like the direct request because it's coming from an authority figure. I'm sure you can think of many practical application of the findings. Since this is introductory psychology, I'm going to kind of keep it short and basic. If you want to know more and discuss more, take further coursework in social psychology.